We talk a lot about Tesla on this show.
Right.
Usually their financials are like their latest tech unveil.
Yeah.
But this time we're going a little deeper
Okay.
behind the scenes into the world of Tesla's manufacturing.
Uh-huh.
We've got some expert interviews for this one
I'm intrigued.
that we're really excited to unpack with you today.
Yeah, it's an area where I think Tesla's reputation for being,
Yeah.
groundbreaking and innovative often clashes, I think, a little bit with the realities of,
Yeah,
large-scale production. And
for sure.
and that's what makes it, I think, so interesting to examine.
Absolutely, because it's one thing to design a really sleek electric car or even to dream up a fleet of RoboTaxis,
Yeah.
but to actually build those things
Yeah.
consistently and at scale,
Right.
that's a whole other ball game.
Totally. And that's where I think our first expert, Hemant Thirupalli, comes in.
Okay.
He was a senior manufacturing engineering manager at Tesla, deeply involved in the Model Y production ramp-up.
Okay.
And he offers some, I think, really incredible firsthand insights into those early days,
Yeah.
a time that he actually refers to as production hell.
Oh, production hell. I mean, a term that I think still to this day probably sends shivers down the spines of Tesla investors.
Right.
I remember all those headlines about production delays, the infamous panel gaps on early Model Ys.
He was there.
He was right in the thick of it.
He was. And he paints a really, I think, vivid picture of their efforts to ramp up Model Y production using automation.
Okay.
They really try to automate everything imaginable.
He talks about robots, and I mean a lot of robots, being used for tasks that were previously manual, like windshield installation, even the sealing of the underbody,
Yeah.
and that this massive deployment of automation
Yeah.
was ultimately how they were able to reach that impressive output of 7,000 Model Ys per week.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's really, I think, a fascinating example of Tesla pushing the boundaries of automation in automotive manufacturing.
Totally.
But as Hemant highlights, even with all that cutting-edge tech,
Yeah.
there were still significant challenges,
Yeah.
particularly when it came to those panel gaps that we mentioned earlier.
Yeah. So robots alone weren't quite the magic bullet.
Right.
And Hemant really emphasizes that. Having skilled workers alongside those robots is crucial for achieving the level of precision that Tesla aims for, and to try to optimize their workforce. Tesla implemented these 3-shift patterns to keep the production line running 24/7, while also minimizing costly overtime.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was a strategy that aimed to maximize efficiency, but according to Hemant,
Uh-huh.
it also led to some challenges with worker burnout and high turnover,
Right.
which then, of course, requires additional time and resources for training replacement.
Yeah, you're constantly kind of backfilling those positions.
A classic example, I think, of those trade-offs that you often encounter in manufacturing.
Yeah.
Especially when you're trying to balance speed,
Yeah.
efficiency, and quality
Yeah.
all at the same time.
It's a tough needle to thread.
Yeah.
And those challenges become even more apparent, I think, when we start looking at Tesla's Cybertruck, a vehicle that Hemant suggests could be an even bigger manufacturing gamble than I think some might realize.
The Cybertruck, that futuristic, angular beast, it's certainly been turning heads, but behind that really kind of radical design, Hemant seems to be hinting at some pretty serious production headaches.
Yeah, he's definitely a little bit wary, I think, of the Cybertruck and its ability to be manufactured profitably and at scale.
So what's the issue then? Is it just about getting the robots to handle this thing?
It's K. It's not so much about the robots, it's more about the processes involved.
Okay.
You see, the Cybertruck uses this ultra-hard steel body.
Right.
And while that's great for durability, it presents some fundamental challenges to how cars are typically manufactured.
Okay, and remind me, how are cars typically manufactured?
So traditional car manufacturing relies very heavily on a process called stamping,
Okay.
where you have these large presses
Yep.
that basically shape sheets of metal into car parts.
Right.
But this ultra-hard steel, it doesn't really play well with those traditional stamping methods.
Okay, so if they can't stamp it, how are they shaping this super strong steel?
Well, they're having to use bending techniques,
Okay.
which, as Hemant points out, are much slower and more labor-intensive.
Okay.
And this shift away from high-volume stamping
Right.
could have a significant impact, I think, both on production speed and cost.
That makes sense. What about Tesla's famous gigapresses? I mean, those massive machines that they love to show off. Can't they just use those?
That's the thing. The Cybertruck's unique design throws another wrench in the works here. Well, those gigapresses, they're ideal for making large single-piece components with relatively simple shapes.
Okay.
But the Cybertruck, with all of its sharp angles and flat surfaces,
Right.
it doesn't really lend itself well to that kind of manufacturing.
So no giant waffle iron for the Cybertruck, I guess.
I guess not.
So they're kind of stuck then with these less efficient methods for a lot of the Cybertruck's construction.
It seems that way, yeah.
Yeah.
At least based on what Hemeth observed.
Yeah.
He seems to suggest that the limitations of gigacasting in this context might force Tesla to rely on more traditional and potentially slower manufacturing processes for many of the Cybertruck's components.
Wow. Okay, so that's the production side. But there's another thing that Hemeth brought up
What's that?
that I thought was interesting, and that's rust.
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 Oh, right, because this thing is... The Cybertruck, at least initially, was all about this like raw, unfinished steel aesthetic.
Right.
Which, you think about steel and the elements.
Yeah.
It doesn't exactly inspire a ton of confidence.
Not a great combination. No.
No.
Unless you like that rusty post-apocalyptic look.
Right, exactly. Hemeth actually mentioned that. There were internal discussions at Tesla.
Yeah.
About how to address this rust issue.
Okay.
Particularly since those early models weren't going to have any traditional paint. Or even considered offering aftermarket paint films that customers could apply themselves.
Wow, talk about a unique selling proposition. Buy our rugged futuristic truck and a roll of protective film. So beyond these technical challenges, though, Hemeth raises, I think, another really interesting point. And this time, it's about the market for a vehicle as unconventional as the Cybertruck.
Okay.
He's not entirely convinced that it's going to be the mass market hit that some people are predicting.
So he sees it as more of a niche product.
Yeah, he seems to think that after that initial wave of early adopters and Tesla enthusiasts, that the Cybertruck might not have the same broad appeal as, say, like a Ford F-150.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay.
He sees it as, appealing to a smaller subset of buyers, those who are really drawn to its unconventional design, and, Tesla's tech more broadly.
Okay.
But that those more established truck manufacturers will likely retain their hold on the majority of the market.
It makes you wonder, with all of these manufacturing challenges, and then the potential for limited demand, is Tesla putting too much emphasis on the Cybertruck?
It's a valid question.
Yeah.
And it becomes even more intriguing, I think,
Yeah.
when you consider Tesla's other
Yeah.
really ambitious project,
Which is?
one that Hemeth suggests could be an even bigger manufacturing headache than the Cybertruck.
Okay, you're really setting this up now.
I am.
What is it?
It's the RoboTaxi.
The RoboTaxi.
Yeah.
This is the autonomous ride-hailing service that's been part of, I think, Tesla's long-term vision for years now. But when you get into the, the nitty-gritty of actually producing this thing at scale, Hemeth's perspective, I think, raises some pretty serious questions about how feasible this actually is.
It seems like even a company as ambitious as Tesla can't quite escape the constraints of, physical space and production capacity.
He's very specific about this, right?
Yeah, he is.
He points to Tesla's Gigafactory in Texas, which is where this RoboTaxi is supposed to be produced.
Right.
And really highlights the very limited space that they have available.
Limited space, yeah. And I think, you have to remember our earlier conversation about the Cybertruck.
Right.
And how, that's already taking up, potentially, more space than they had initially planned.
Right.
Well, it seems like that decision has had a direct impact on the space that they have allocated for RoboTaxi production.
So they're already feeling the squeeze, and they haven't even really started producing these things.
Yeah, and we're not even just talking about like floor space here.
Yeah.
I mean, the RoboTaxi, with all of its autonomous driving technology, it's a complex sensor suite.
Sure.
I mean, this thing demands a level of manufacturing, precision and sophistication. That's really beyond anything Tesla's done before.
It's one thing to build these cars.
Yeah.
But to ensure that all of that tech works seamlessly and reliably every single time.
Every time.
That's a whole other challenge.
Huge challenge.
On top of just, assembling the thing.
Absolutely. And remember, this is all happening alongside, the ongoing production of the Model Y.
Right.
Ramp up of Cybertruck production.
Yeah, they're juggling a lot.
Tesla's trying to juggle like 3 very different vehicles.
Yeah.
Each with their own complexities.
Yeah.
All within, the same factory walls.
It makes you wonder if something has to give it.
It really does. And Hemeth actually even seems to think so.
Yeah.
He suggests that Tesla might actually have to sacrifice some Model Y production capacity
Wow.
if they're serious about meeting their targets for the RoboTaxi.
Wow. So something to watch for sure as they ramp up production of both the Cybertruck and this RoboTaxi.
Absolutely.
It's really interesting to hear this perspective of someone who was so in the weeds on the manufacturing side at Tesla.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is where the insights from our second expert, Leon Wang, become particularly relevant. I think you remember that Leon is a former engineer from Waymo.
Right. Waymo, with their very cautious, almost methodical approach to autonomous vehicle development, really presents such a stark contrast, I think, to Tesla's kind of move fast and break things mentality.
Perfect way to put it. And Leon's perspective, I think, is so valuable here because it allows us to kind of zoom out from Tesla's specific challenges and look at the broader autonomous vehicle landscape as a whole.
Okay.
And I think what becomes clear is that it's not just about being first to market.
Okay.
It's about building a system that people trust.
Right.
That regulators trust.
Right. And that's something that Leon emphasizes repeatedly. He talks about the challenges of training AI for those rare, unusual driving scenarios. The kind that humans can just kind of handle intuitively,
right,
but can really trip up even the most advanced autonomous systems.
Yeah, he uses this great analogy of a duck in the road.
Okay.
Which, might sound a little silly.
It does.
But think about it. A duck in the road is something that most of us, if we've been driving for any amount of time, have probably encountered at some point.
Sure.
And for a human driver,
right,
it's really not a big deal.
Right.
But for an autonomous vehicle, it presents this incredibly complex decision-making challenge.
You suddenly realize how much we take for granted about our own driving skills. All those tiny adjustments that we make unconsciously based on years of experience,
right,
that AI is still struggling to replicate at that level of reliability.
And that's why I think you see companies like Waymo being so laser-focused on data, on really exposing their autonomous systems to as many of those different driving scenarios as they possibly can.
So just feeding the machine constantly with more information.
Yeah, I mean, they are using just vast amounts of data to train their AI to handle. Everything from, ducks in the road to unexpected lane changes, inclement weather, you name it.
It's fascinating how they're trying to tackle these challenges through this kind of sheer data crunching.
Yeah.
But of course, Tesla, as always, is taking a bit of a different approach.
Right. They're not using this whole suite of sensors like LiDAR and radar.
Right.
Tesla's betting big on cameras. They're really trying to leverage the data from the millions of Tesla vehicles that are already out there on the road.
Right.
Those that are equipped with their full self-driving system to basically train their AI.
It's like this massive crowdsourced data collection effort.
It is.
This constant stream of real-world driving information that's just being fed into this AI.
That's the idea.
The question is it enough?
Right. And Leon, with his experience at Waymo, raises some, I think, valid concerns about this over-reliance on cameras.
In what way?
Well, he acknowledges the advantages of cameras. They're cheaper. They're less complex. They're certainly less intrusive than these other types of sensors.
Yeah.
But he also points out that cameras can be a lot less reliable, particularly when you have these challenging environmental conditions.
Like what?
I'm talking about things like fog, rain, even low-hanging sun.
Okay.
These are all situations where a camera-based system might struggle.
Right.
And potentially create some serious safety risks.
And safety, of course, is paramount in this industry, especially after, some of those high-profile accidents that we've seen with the autonomous vehicles.
Right. And Leon actually even brings up the example of the cruise shutdown in San Francisco, where they had that single incident involving a pedestrian that essentially resulted in regulators halting their entire operation.
Wow.
And I think highlights just how delicate this balance is that companies like Tesla and Waymo have to strike.
They're under the microscope.
Totally. I mean, they need to be pushing the boundaries of what's technologically possible, but they also need to be prioritizing safety and really working, I think, to build that public confidence in these systems.
Yeah. It's not just about the technology itself working.
No.
It's about public perception.
Public perception is huge.
Last guest.
And I think, that's something that maybe Tesla, with its, more aggressive approach, hasn't quite figured out yet.
Yeah, it's a fascinating and complex issue. with, I think, no easy answer. So as we kind of wrap things up here, what should our listeners be taking away from this deep dive?
I think the biggest takeaway is that the future of transportation, especially when it comes to autonomous vehicles, is still very much unwritten.
Okay.
There are a lot of different approaches being explored, each with their own advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah, it's not a foregone conclusion that any one company or any one approach is going to kind of win out in the end.
It's anyone's game at this point.
We've really explored, I think, those different approaches today through the lens of Tesla's manufacturing efforts, uncovering, I think, both the incredible innovation that they're known for, but also some of the very real hurdles that they face in trying to scale production and actually bring these ambitious projects to market.
It's a journey that's going to be full of twists and turns.
For sure.
We might even see a few more ducks in the road.
We might encounter a few ducks along the way.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
My pleasure as always.
Until next time, keep those questions coming.